Hey everybody, it's Captain Trucker here. Welcome back to the channel. Appreciate you all tuning in. I'm down here near Florida, south of Orlando. But today's video, I want to talk about, there's a very disturbing case that has been brought to our attention. And there was an expat that apparently is serving 3 years in jail for arguing with his Filipina wife, okay? 3 years in jail, all right? And I think it's important that expats are aware of this in the Philippines. And we're going to talk a little bit about why this happened and also the Violence Against Women Act that people need to be aware of because it's very real, okay? So, you know, in the West or America, generally we associate the word violence often with physical, right? So physical violence. But I believe in the Philippines, and maybe here too, I'm not sure, violence can also be considered like emotional, psychological abuse, like verbal violence. And I think that was the case here, man. I saw the story on like a major vlogger's channel and this other guy's channel who was talking about it. I think maybe it was his friend, this Irish guy that was talking about it. He's got a pretty good channel. But yeah, and we don't know much about like the details about what's happened, and I suspect that there's a lot we don't know, so I'm not gonna like speculate. But what we do know is that, like I said, but then she claimed that, you know, that caused her a lot of psychological abuse apparently. And yeah, they sentenced him to 3 years in jail, and I heard that maybe they were gonna try to settle or something. Like she asked for 3 million pesos. He's not going to pay it, so I guess he's doing his time. But yeah, RA 9262, okay, the Violence Against Women Act, that also covers psychological violence, which can include accusations or repeated insults, emotional manipulation, or any behavior the courts think cause emotional or mental suffering, all right? Now, most of the time, like when this stuff reaches the courts and this stuff reaches the police, they usually will get like maybe a restraining order, moral damages, fines, maybe probation. But yeah, I mean, prison time's on the channel. Apparently you can get 6 months to 6 years in prison, and this fella, I guess, is doing 3 years. So anyway, look, I'm not doing this to like fearmonger and to cause a lot of panic. But it is important that vloggers talk about this because, yeah, I just find it really disturbing, all right? So, look, there's so many relationships that people get into in life, expats, foreigners here in the U.S., that, you know, can be toxic, all right? Now, I'm blessed and I'm very grateful that I fell in with good people in the Philippines, like decent people, honorable people. I don't have to worry about stuff like that, but there's a lot of guys out there, some who deserve it, maybe some that don't, that are probably suffering in silence, okay? Because even though these cases are rare, right, which they are, like very realistically this doesn't happen a lot statistically, but like with all crimes, with all injustices, I mean, how many stuff do you think is unreported, right? How much stuff do you think has really happened? How many foreigners there, old men who can't take care of themselves, who maybe have mental issues, physical disabilities, fell in with like, you know, the wrong crowd or the wrong Filipina who's clearly just using him for money and she's extorting him, and the guy's got no family, no friends, he doesn't have any real substantial net worth or income, probably his social security, he's got no friends back home. What do you think happens to a man like that, right? All right, so this is a complex history, man. And the other question is why do you think the Philippines had to come out with this act, the Violence Against Women Act? It's just my guess, and I'm speculating, that this goes back a long time, and it's been happening for a long time. I think a lot of foreigners over the years have probably taken advantage of such countries, exploited poor people, used places for sex tourism, stuff like this. Kids get left behind, women get taken advantage of. And I would probably guess that the power dynamic is usually the foreigners usually have more options, right? They willfully go there, they can usually leave, they usually have more money and all that kind of stuff. So I would guess that the Filipinos had to protect themselves with such laws, all right? And yeah, this kind of stuff does happen, man. You know, like on this channel, I've always talked about, you know, we talk about personal responsibility, and you know, most of the time the expats, us foreigners going there, if we choose wisely and make good decisions, we can do okay and everybody can benefit. But you're getting small populations of foreigners, man, that don't know how to take care of themselves. That some of them, like I said, they could have psychological issues, they could have physical handicaps, and they're sort of at wit's end, and they get scammed online by a pretty Filipina who basically ends up making their life a living hell, and they're living in some, you know, dilapidated house out there in the province with nobody to help them, and they're living under the constant threat of fear because this woman's holding this law over his head. And I can only imagine how often this must be happening. It's kind of a sad reality. Now look, I'm gonna sit here, I'm not gonna, this isn't, I've said this countless times, most of the Filipinas and Filipinos, lovely culture, family oriented, great people. But in a population of 111 million people, you're gonna get some bad players, you know? And it's the same with the expat population. I think overall the expats tend to be more problematic, but not all expats deserve to be taken advantage of. Like, not all expats are bad men by nature, you know? And this is like the tragedy. Now with this case, with this guy, I have no idea. I'm not gonna pretend I know. I have no idea. It's just, I think the Irishman on his channel, he was saying he was his friend, he was a good guy. I don't know. We don't know. What we do know is that he's gonna be in jail for 3 years for allegedly emotional violence, not physical, okay? Now we don't know what happened. Whew. But yeah. You know, the other thing that's interesting is like what I was talking about. You know, like in America, we tend to air our public dirty laundry more, right? Like when it comes to domestic stuff or dysfunctional relationships. You know, we even have like those talk shows back in the day, like Jerry Springer, and it's more like accepted in our culture to sort of, families will publicly talk about their dramas. Now you go to the Far East, like Philippines, you know, they're very, that kind of stuff is very, very shameful, you know, because most people, especially I would say Filipinos, don't want the public or the police or the community to know about their dysfunctional relationship. They don't want them to know about their drama. Understandably, that's like a point of shame, right? And so I think, personally, this stuff, unfortunately, is probably happening more than we think. And this is why you get some groups, some of the charlatans that sponge off the passport bros movements, you know, they kind of get on here and they're like, you know, us expats got to stick together. The women are all trying to take advantage of us, you know, and they kind of try to paint the culture like that, like it's sort of every expat, you know, like the expat victim narrative more, right? But I don't really buy that either. This is where you got to have some discernment, right? Because like I said, most of the time, I think expats have more control than they think. And there's even stuff they have illegally to protect themselves too. And I kind of wrote some of these down, like for these guys in these dysfunctional relationships, I mean, you know, the important thing is you just got to stay cool and don't cause any, you know, go on any verbal rants or write crazy stuff, you know, document everything, because from what I've read, like when some of this stuff actually reaches, like, you know, maybe the police or a judge, like most places, they're pretty reasonable people. Like if a Filipino is clearly provoking a man or trying to extort him, the authorities can see through that. So most of these cases get dropped or settled, but like with the one we heard about, it didn't. And we don't know what happened. So, but yeah, there's, you know, there's some ways, common sense, you can protect yourself. But look, this is the reality, guys. Like, we're rolling the dice, you know, as foreigners. And I'm not going to sit here and say that you're not vulnerable, because you are. You're still a foreigner in a foreign land, okay? And most of the time, you don't have family, you don't have friends, and you probably don't have a lot of money. Now, you can have some expat friends, but, you know, is that really going to help you necessarily? You think being friends with some vlogger is like sort of your ticket to success out there? No. A vlogger, an expat, is likely not going to be able to totally help you out if you find yourself in hot water. You know, more than just having somebody to talk to, basically. But yeah, man. Philippines is a great place. And like I said, I'm thankful that I fell in with a decent community and a decent family and all that. But some men aren't. And we're not hearing about it all the time, but men are suffering out there. Yeah, some of them are. I told that story. I heard another story about this guy, old man. I think his girlfriend like tried to beat him to death with a baseball bat, and then I guess halfway through trying to like beat him with the bat, she felt guilty or something. And so I guess her boyfriend was in on it, so he came to finish the job. That was a horrible story we heard about. That made the news. But there was another, like a guy I met, this really old man, and he wanted to talk to me, and I kind of like, I was preoccupied at the time, and I kind of brushed him off, and I feel bad about it because I remember now, like his hand was like kind of shaking, and he seemed really nervous, like he really like he was really needed to talk to somebody. And then I saw in the distance his girlfriend or wife coming from him, much younger woman. She just looked like the meanest person, you know. Just, it's so obvious what was going on there, you know what I mean? And I was preoccupied at the time, so I kind of left. But yeah, man, there's like vulnerable men out there, dude. All right, sorry, my camera overheated, I'm back. But my point is that I want to make to Filipinos and other people is that, yeah, there's a lot of expats now and historically that have been entitled, that have done inappropriate things, or they took advantage. But I just also want to remind people that not all expats are like bad. They're not all bad-natured people. I mean, people make mistakes in life. Some men are just misguided. Like I said, they could have physical disabilities, psychological, a lifetime of abuse, of bad circumstances, and they can get involved with like not the best people over there, or like Filipinos. And remind people that, you know, it's not all these men, the ones we don't hear about, necessarily deserve to be sort of punished and crucified for the mistakes of people in the past, you know. Yeah, man. And also, I think men just got to be more responsible, like when they go out there, and know what they're getting into. And we also got to remind us Americans and others that, you know, like the Filipinos, they're a much tougher, resilient culture than we are, okay? Just little things. And I think that's just through years of surviving different foreigners going there, colonialization, the Pacific Ring of Fire. They're just tougher people, I think. And I think that there's also what that can translate to sometimes, like from our perspective, maybe just little things. Like, I'll give you a silly story, but there's a misunderstanding there. Like, they're just tougher. Like, I was at a park once, and it was raining outside, and I was wearing my sandals, and I slipped, and I fell down a flight of like 5 stairs, you know, and these young Filipino guys, they were laughing at me, which, you know, kind of made me laugh too, because it was embarrassing. But at the same time, I was thinking, geez, you know, if I was like an older man or something, like I could have broke my arm or broke my leg, like I don't think they'd be laughing then. But also, like, if you're in a place of business here in the US, and like, you know, people at the business witness you falling down a flight of stairs, like, people are gonna like panic and be like, oh my God, this is serious, we gotta call an ambulance, we have to document this, you know, whether the concern is feigned or real or not, whatever. But I just think they're tougher in general, you know what I mean? But just remember that, how that translate if a man's dealing with like supposed or a scammer or something, is that they're not going to have much empathy for you, even if you fork over a bunch of cash and you do whatever they want. And I think some men are just sort of like slowly bleeding out there, and that can happen. So it's just something to keep in mind. And you know, again, I'm thankful, I'm grateful that I was blessed that I fell in with like decent people and decent families, and I'm grateful for the people that watch and support this channel. But I just want to remind all of us that we got to look out for each other. You know, there's a lot of BS in media and everything, and not all narratives are true, not all of them are untrue, not everything's 100% good, 100% bad. This is just the real, man. It's like, it's the way it is. But anyway, let me know what you all think. Share in the comments. Do you think this kind of stuff is happening more than we may think, where men are being taken advantage of or whatever, and we just don't hear about it a lot? Let me know what you all think. It's Captain Trucker. You all take care. Be good out there. I'm at the gym. I'm going to go train.